Welcome in, everyone. My name is Robbie, also known as Closing Dime. I'm one of the owners of the Sharp Money Discord, and today we're going to talk about our plus EV bots in the Sharp Money Discord, and also mostly focusing on NFL spreads and key numbers. So I built a little line graph to display to you guys to show you what the value of a half point is worth in an NFL spread. Now, obviously, we know that there are key numbers centered around touchdowns and field goals. So 3 is a key number, 7 is a key number, 10 is a key number, but how much value is actually worth, moving from 7 to 7.5? We assume it's a lot, but how much actually is it? So I've determined the value of a half point by using Pinnacle's alternate lines and how they price their numbers to kind of create this graph. So the issue that a lot of plus EV bettors have is, we have a handful of sharp books. We have Pinnacle, we have Circa, we have BookMaker. And to be really confident in a play, we want to kind of use a blend of all of their odds to determine, a fair value price to find an edge in the market. But the problem with Circa and BookMaker is they mostly only post main lines. So they just post one line and the odds for that line. They don't have a bunch of alternates. So what happens a lot in the NFL and other sports as well is we start identifying plays that have value to Pinnacle alternate lines, but we're not sure if they would have value to Circa or Bookmaker if they, priced out a bunch of alternate lines. So by understanding the value of a half point, we can create our own, I would call it artificial lines for Bookmaker and Circa to kind of compare to this Circa alternate line. So we're going to do a deep dive into how to actually do that. But first, we're going to look at the graph I made just to get an understanding of key numbers in the NFL. So here's the line graph that I made to determine the fair value of each movement in the market between, 1 point spread to a 10.5 point spread, which is, obviously your most common point spreads in the NFL. So on the x-axis here, I have those price movements or those line movements from 1 to 1.5, from 1.5 to 2. This also works in reverse. So if you're moving from a 3 down to a 2.5, it's also 23 cents of value, but in the opposite direction, if that makes sense. We'll go into that a little bit more. But yeah, the x-axis is the line movement, and then the y-axis is the value in terms of cents, an American odds. So if we look here at a couple big spikes, that's going to be our key numbers. Those are numbers that have the most value. So for an example here, moving from 2.5 to 3 is worth about 20 cents of fair value. So let's just say you have a team that is getting plus 2.5 points at, we'll call it minus 150. If you want to price that team getting 3 points now, we have to decrease the value by 20 cents because we're getting extra value here. So the payout is going to get lowered. So instead of being minus 150 at plus 2.5, this would also be equivalent to minus 170 at plus 3, right? So we are decreasing the value of the line because we're getting extra points. Now it also works the other way. If we have a team getting 3 and we want them minus 2.5, then we add it. So let's just say they were minus 150, you go from 3 to 2.5. Now they're minus 130. It's a better payout. So let's just look at these key numbers. At 2.5 to 3 is big. That's the second biggest key number, biggest move in the market, which is worth 20 cents. Then the most important number is moving from 3 to 3.5. Obviously, around that field goal range is worth 23 cents of fair value. The next spike we get up here is, you guessed it, it's in that 7 range. Obviously, touchdowns and field goals are the most common scoring method in the NFL. So key numbers are correlated to touchdown and field goal, points. So right here we see a move from 6.5 to 7 is worth about 15 cents of fair value. And then from 7 to 7.5 is about 16 cents of fair value. We see a little dip in between, that 3 and the 7. Really have a dead zone. I would call it a dead zone between 4.5 to 5 is only worth 5 cents of fair value. And then 5.5 to 5.5 is only worth about 5 cents as well. Because, the market, when you see numbers bouncing back between 4.5, 5.5, it's the market has not picked a direction yet because these numbers are very irrelevant. It's very uncommon for a game to end by 5 points. So this number is the market kind of bouncing back and forth until it decides to break into a real key number. So you'll see spreads move a lot in between this range, where if a line is set at plus 3, you're going to have to see a lot of action for the line to move off of a key number because it's such a valuable number. So if we look past here as well, we see another little low point, which is, this 8.5 to 9.5 range is kind of irrelevant when it comes to football spreads. And we see the spike back up near this 9.5 to 10 and 10.5 to, or 10 to 10.5, which is about 12 cents of fair value. So key numbers, kind of obvious, but now we can give them a true value, right? And this chart is going to help us create our own, what I call artificial markets for BookMaker and Circa, so that we can compare them to, the Pinnacle alternate markets and get a real good determination of what the fair value price should be. So that all sound complicated. It's very understandable. We're going to break it down, the math going forward, and actually look at some real examples here with the Sharp Money Discord bots and, the information that they provide, because the information that the Sharp Money bots have is really next level. I mean, we determine the play to a lot of Pinnacle alternate lines, but we also show the odds movement of the main line of Circa and BookMaker, which gives you the ability to kind of price your own lines from there and just read the overall direction of the market. I always want to know where all 3 Sharp books are, even if the DVIG and, plus EV play is just to one of them. I want to know, kind of where the market is moving. So we're going to break down a play from the Sharp Money bot right now. The last thing I want to mention in terms of this chart is that these are general numbers. I took multiple games and kind of averaged, the value of the half point for multiple games. Now, I will maybe update this chart as the season goes along if pricing changes a little bit. Key numbers might change throughout the season. We see, the extra point getting longer. We see people going for 2 points more often. So these key numbers are probably a little bit different in value than they were a couple of years ago. So as the game progresses and new rules changes happen and new strategies develop, these key numbers do get tweaked a little bit. So I'm going to pay attention throughout the year to make sure these numbers are still accurate with what I put on screen right now. The other thing I'd like to point out, like I said, these numbers are determined by a lot of factors. One of the main factors is how many total points are actually in the game. So if you are betting a spread where the game is projected to have 55 total points, you're going to want to use this chart as reference, but bump down the values a little bit. If there are 55 points scored in the game, a half point of a spread is going to be valued a little less because there's, predicted to be so many points scored. Now, on the flip side of this, if you have a game that is projected to have 35 total points scored and you are getting, an extra point or a half a point, then this value is going to be worth a lot more. There's not going to be that many points in this game scored, so every point that is scored is going to be worth a little bit more. Now, when I took this sample size and built this chart, I was looking at plays in the more common total points range from like 43 to 48 range. That's kind of the average NFL total score, that I thought. So I didn't want to pick numbers outside of that. So just for reference, if you are using this chart and you're looking at a game with a high total, bump these fair values down a little bit. If you're looking at a play where the total is much lower, then maybe bump these values up a little bit. All right, here is a play from the Sharp Money plus EV bot. We have the Eagles versus the Cowboys. I know there's a lot of information on the screen, but we're going to break it down so that you can make the most of it. More information is always better. So this is a play on the Sportsbook Fanatics, which is showing value to Pinnacle. That's our DVIG book because they have this -6.5 line for the Eagles. Meanwhile, like I said, Circa and BookMaker only offer main markets, so they only have one number, which does not directly match this -6.5. That's the issue that we typically find with plus EV betting, is not being able to compare the Sharp books because they don't all have the exact same line out. So for example, we identified this play as value to an alternate Pinnacle line, but we want to kind of go the extra step of determining a Circa and BookMaker fair value as well to make sure it looks good to the rest of the Sharp books. So the first thing I do here is I really look at the movement of the books because that is also very important. When a lot of plus EV bettors view the market as like a stagnant market where, this play has 0.59% value to Pinnacle right now. But if you can understand where the market is trending, you can play much smaller edges that will actually close well. And you really want to get a good picture of where the market is moving. And that was the original purpose of providing you with the Circa and BookMaker lines as well. But first, let's take a look at Pinnacle. And this is in this chart below here, where we have the Pinnacle limits and odds listed. So this white line represents the Pinnacle limits, which is $50,000. That means they are willing to accept wagers from anyone for $50,000, which is a huge sign of confidence. This is a primetime game. This could get up to $100,000 limits, but $50,000 limits is very high, which means they are very confident in their market right now. If you look at the pink line, that is the odds for this -6.5 for the Eagles. And they've moved from about -125 all the way down to -152, which is a strong indicator of sharp action getting on the Eagles right now. The other thing I like to do also is look at the price we're getting on Fanatics. So -135 is the price we're getting. And then I like to look on the chart and see, did we move through that -135 price range, or was there any resistance there? So we moved very quick through this -135 all the way down to -147. And then there was a little resistance back and forth and ended up dropping back down to -152. So clear indicator that there's value to Pinnacle. Pinnacle's market is moving towards the Eagles, which is also great. Now we have to determine, number one, which way is BookMaker and Circa moving? So if BookMaker and Circa also are moving towards the Eagles, favoring the Eagles, then this is a play that I will look into a little bit further. As we can see here, we have the date and timestamps of Circa main lines and their price. So Circa typically doesn't mess with their prices too much. They just move their line. So in the last few days here, we see Circa move from -6.5 to -7 to -7.5 to -8 for this main line. And, these aren't small moves. We know that these are key numbers we're moving through. -6.5 to -7 is a huge move. And then -7 to -7.5 is a huge move. So that is indicating some really strong action towards the Eagles, which is great. And if you look over here at BookMaker, you kind of have the same thing. They did go from -7.5 to -7 and then quickly back up to -8. So they both settled at this -8 number. So overall, this is a play that I'm really excited about. I'm really excited to look into a little bit more. The market is moving so hard on the Eagles. This is probably a play that I would just go ahead and hit this right now without actually doing this extra math. But what we're going to do is now use the Circa main line at -8 and try to build our own fair value price to, if this number was -6.5 on Circa, what would it look like? And we can do that by using the value chart that I displayed earlier. And here is a table breaking down the exact steps that you need to take to determine the fair value of the Circa price at -6.5. So the goal here is to get our main line -8, -110 to a fair value for Circa at -6.5. So for this example, we're moving from -8 to -6.5, which means, this outcome is becoming more likely because we are taking away points that we need to cover as the Eagles. So this means that our fair values are going to be dropping instead of going up. So we need to first establish our starting point, which is what I said is our Circa main line at -8, -110. So the first thing you have to do is determine the fair value of the main line. So this line is set at -8, -110. The other side of this line, which is the Cowboys +8, is also -110. So if you don't know how to devig, there are multiple calculators you can do, but -110 -110 is equal to a fair value of +100 on both sides. So our starting point is -8 +100. That is our fair value price to start. Now we can work with our fair value half points with the chart that I use. So right here, we first need to look at the first step from moving from our -8 to -7.5. What is that worth? If we look at our chart, it is worth 7 cents. So like I said, we are decreasing the payout because we are getting less points that we have to cover. So we go from +100 fair value to -107 fair value on that first move from -8 to -7.5. But now we start crossing the key numbers, and those values start being worth a lot. So we go from minus 7.5 to minus 7, which we put at 17 cents of value. So now our total movement so far is a combined total of minus 24 cents. So that, is equivalent to a minus 124 fair value at if we projected this at minus 7, our fair value would be minus 124. But we're not at minus 6.5 yet. So we need to move from minus 7 to minus 6.5, which is adding another 15 cents to that fair value. So now we have our final number. Minus 6.5 is going to equal a fair value of minus 139 compared to this Circa number. So we have just created, out of this main line, we have created an artificial Circa alternate line to help us in the process of finding good bets. Now, the final fair value was minus 139. So that is actually more than the Pinnacle fair value. Pinnacle fair value was, minus 136. So we are saying this has even more of a chance of hitting than Pinnacle is saying. So minus 139 is showing, more like a 1% edge to this number than Pinnacle is, which is a great play and a great sign. The other thing too is the movement of the market is just beautiful in this play. I mean, we have Circa moving through key numbers, which is just showing so much action on the Eagles. This is the side you want to be on. We have value to the Pinnacle line, and also we just created an alternate Circa line ourselves to determine the value, which we also have value to that. So this is a perfect example of what I would call a slam dunk play. All right, that was a ton of math to throw at you, but if you've watched this whole video, you're about to be rewarded because I spent the time to build out an Excel sheet that does all the work for you. So I'm going to walk you through exactly how this works. And you're going to be able to find this in the free portion of the Sharp Money Discord. I'll have a link to it there. So definitely join the Discord to get access to this. This is going to be an advantage that Sharp Money members have that the rest of the market does not have. So let's just solve for the one that we just did, the Eagles example. So we are looking at, there are a couple numbers we need to input here. So our anchor spread is going to be the spread of the Circa or BookMaker mainline, whichever one we're trying to produce that alternate number for. And we're going to use the absolute value. So in this example, we had Eagles minus 8. The absolute value of the Eagles minus 8 is just simply 8. And then we need the American odds for the anchor side, which was minus 110. And the other side of the line for the Cowboys was also minus 110. And now we have to say whether this was a favorite or an underdog. So a favorite would be, minus 8, and an underdog would be like plus 8. So this was minus 8. So we are putting in that it was the favorite in the minus. Now we have the target spread, or the absolute value of the target spread. So we are looking for minus 6.5. So we are going to type in 6.5 for our target number, and we're going to project the fair value right here. So minus 139. And you can move these numbers around. Remember, if you're switching to plus, if you're trying to figure out a number that is a plus number, you have to switch this, obviously. But this is going to lay out any alternate line you want to produce for the Circa main line. So, for example, if we wanted to switch it to, let's just say we want to do 4.5 instead of 6.5, we can quickly, easily produce a fair value number for minus 4.5 for the Eagles, which is minus 171, which you can also see on this chart down here. It lists every single alternate spread and half point value, and also spits out the implied win probability. So this is really good. This is going to be very valuable tool to mess around with to, start determining, some rough ideas of fair values on alternate markets for BookMaker and Circa. So I hope this helps a lot. Like I said, this will be available in the Sharp Money Discord. The link to join will be below. I'm always in the Discord. I'm always active there. So feel free to shoot me a message, a DM, whatever you want to talk about this process. All right, I appreciate you guys watching. Before you click out, please hit a like on this video. I appreciate it. All right, I'll see you guys next time.